acute coronary syndrome, don't panic. What are the challenges and how to manage? Let us hear it from Dr. Ameya Karenskar, sir. Now I request sir to give us an insight. I request Dr. Nazima Kanse and Dr. Sunita Zine, madam, may I call Dr. Sangeeta Patil, ma'am, to chair the session, please. Sujata Zine is consultant anesthesiologist. She is working with Ozone Anesthesia Group. She has special interest in difficult airway and onco-anesthesia.
Dr. Ameya Karenskar, he'll be talking on acute coronary syndrome. He's a consultant in cardiac anesthesia and cardiac critical care at UMS Sagri. He has numerous publications to his account, and without any delay, I request sir to please start his presentation.
Hello, good evening all. So I will be briefing about perioperative management of acute coronary syndrome. So first about perioperative myocardial infarction. Its incidence is 1 to 17% in all types of surgeries, and it is an independent risk factor for cardiovascular death. MI after non-cardiac surgery has an in-hospital mortality of 15 to 25%, especially in first 30 days. As per Vision group of investigators, as many as 65 to 93% of the patients with PMI have no ischemic symptoms, and 50% of the cases of the PMI go unrecognized. So, acute coronary syndrome consists of unstable angina, non-ST segment elevation myocardial infarction, or ST segment elevation myocardial infarction. So, when a patient is having a chest pain, if there is ST segment elevation, it goes into STEMI. If there is no ST segment elevation, if biomarkers are negative, then it is unstable angina. If biomarkers are positive, it is NSTEMIS. So, definition of myocardial infarction is characteristic rise and fall of cardiac troponin levels, at least one value higher than 99th percentile of the upper reference limit, with at least one of the following features: ischemic nature of the chest pain, recent significant ECG findings such as ST elevation or T-wave alterations or LBBB, or presence of the Q waves, new onset regional wall motion abnormalities on echocardiography, demonstration of an intracoronary thrombus on angiography or autopsy. So, how this perioperative myocardial infarction is different than classic MI? So, PMI's diagnosing is very difficult. Most of the PMIs manifest without symptoms. Most of the times, patient is under general anesthesia or sedation, and he is not able to tell us the symptoms. And ECG changes are very transient and subtle. CKMB has a very limited sensitivity and specificity for during surgery there is skeletal muscle injury, and it is often recognized late. That is, most commonly it is recognized 2 to 3 days after surgery, and that leads to high mortality. So a new terminology was introduced: myocardial injury after non-cardiac surgery. It is a prognostically relevant postoperative troponin level elevation during or within a period of 30 days after non-cardiac surgery, with an underlying ischemic origin of troponin elevation. That is, all the non-cardiac causes of troponin elevations have to be eliminated. Absence of other clinical or ECG criteria of MI. The extent of troponin elevation has been generally defined as greater than 99th percentile of upper normal range. So they have defined 4 prognostic thresholds, that is TNT level more than 0.03, HSTNT more than 65, HSTNT between 20 and 60, and HSTNT absolute range more than 14. These thresholds are independently associated with an increased risk of 30-day mortality. Means is relatively frequent, with incidence ranging from 8 to 19%. Means plus ECG sign or symptom of MI is called as perioperative myocardial infarction. Subsequently, they came up with a mean scoring, in which age more than 75 years was given 1 point, anterior myocardial ischemia evidence was given 1 point, and ST segment elevation or new LBBB was given 2 points. Expected 30-day mortality rates with 0 point is 5.2%, 1 point is 10, 2 point is 19%, 3.32%, and 4 point is 49.8%. So, fourth universal definition of myocardial infarction states that type 1 MI is a spontaneous MI related to atherosclerotic plaque rupture, ulceration or fissuring, erosion or dissection with resulting intramural thrombus. Type 2 MI is myocardial injury with necrosis, in which a condition other than coronary artery disease contributes to an imbalance between myocardial oxygen supply and demand. Type 3 is a sudden cardiac death. Type 4 ABC are related to percutaneous coronary intervention, and type 5 is associated with coronary artery bypass grafting. So, about etiology of perioperative myocardial infarction. In type 1 perioperative myocardial infarction, there is a pre-existing unstable coronary plaque. During surgeries, there is vasoconstriction of coronaries, which is aggravated by hypothermia, sympathetic predominance, hemodynamic perturbations, tachycardia or hypertension, which lead to erosion or rupture of these plaques. In addition to that, surgery causes perioperative procoagulant environment, decreased fibrinolysis, recent PCI with stent and sedation of DAPT. All leads to procoagulant environment, which leads to acute ACS type 1. Now, type 2 perioperative myocardial infarction is due to demand-supply mismatch. There are some conditions during surgery which causes decreased myocardial oxygen supply, like elevated heart rate, arrhythmias, withdrawal of beta blockers, pain, sympathetic hyperactivity, hypotension, hypovolemia, cardiac compromise, and vasodilation. Coronary vasoconstriction, perioperative hypoxemia, anemia, and atelectasis. And there are some conditions which leads to increased myocardial oxygen demand, like elevated heart rate or arrhythmias, withdrawal of beta blockers, elevated myocardial stress, hypertension, hypervolemia, increased left ventricular and diastolic pressures, and elevated myocardial wall stress. So, what are the precipitating factors for intraoperative ACS? Hemodynamic changes during induction, hypoxia, hypertension, hypothermia, pain, blood loss, arrhythmogenic electrolyte disturbances, inflammation, blood sugar instability, acute stress response, and avoidance of anticoagulation. So, pre-op evaluation is of utmost importance while managing this case. There are major factors that are markers of unstable coronary artery disease, and these has to be ruled out for any elective case, like acute myocardial infarction within 7 days or recent MI within less than 30 days, unstable severe angina class 3 or class 4, decompensated heart failure, NYHA class 4 or the worsening of the heart failure, significant arrhythmias like high-grade AV block, Mobitz type 2 block, and symptomatic VT or VF, supraventricular arrhythmias with uncontrolled ventricular rate, and symptomatic bradycardia. There are some parameters that those are markers of stable coronary artery disease, like history of ISD, that is untreated, history of congestive cardiac failure, history of stroke or TIA, preoperative insulin-dependent diabetes mellitus, and serum creatinine more than 2. And there are some minor factors like family history of CAD, polyvascular status, uncontrolled systemic hypertension, hypercholesterolemia, and smoking. ECG abnormalities like stable arrhythmia, left ventricular hypertrophy, post-infarction more than 3 months with asymptomatic without treatment, post-CABG or PTCA more than 3 months and less than 6 years with no symptoms of angina. So, there are some recommendations by 2022 ESC guidelines for evaluation of cardiovascular assessment and management of patients undergoing non-cardiac surgery. These state that whenever you are assessing a preoperative patient with a newly detected murmur, chest pain, dyspnea or peripheral edema, transthoracic echocardiography is recommended, that is grade 1 recommendation. In patients with newly detected murmur suggesting clinically significant pathology, TTE is recommended before high risk NCS. In patients with newly detected murmurs but without other signs and symptoms of cardiovascular disease, TT should be considered before moderate or high risk NCS. If patient scheduled for elective NCS has chest pain or other symptoms suggestive of undetected CAD, further diagnostic workup before NCS is recommended. If a patient is having family history of genetic cardiomyopathy, it is recommended to perform an ECG and TT before NCS regardless of age and symptoms. In all patients with age between 45 to 65 years of age without signs, symptoms and history of CVD, ECG and biomarkers should be considered before high risk NCS, that is a grade 2A recommendation, that is, it may be considered. In patients with preoperative assessment with a newly detected murmur, chest pain, dyspnea and peripheral edema, if the patient is having need of acute NCS, also has chest pain or other symptoms suggestive of undetected CAD, a multidisciplinary assessment approach is recommended. In patients with dyspnea and or peripheral edema, ECG and NT-proBNP test is indicated before non-cardiac surgery unless there is a certain non-cardiac explanation. In patients with dyspnea and peripheral edema and elevated NT-proBNP, TTE is recommended before NCS. NCS is non-cardiac surgery. So when transthoracic echocardiography should be done, TTE is recommended with poor functional capacity, that is exercise capacity less than 4 METs, and or high NT-proBNP or BNP levels if murmurs are detected before high risk NCS in order to undertake high risk reduction strategies. It is class 1 recommendation. TT should be considered in patients with suspected new CVD or unexplained signs or symptoms before high risk NCS, that is grade 2A recommendation. TT may be considered in patients with poor functional capacity, abnormal ECG and high NT-proBNP levels, or more than one clinical risk factor before intermediate risk of non-cardiac surgery. And to avoid, if there is a situation where you cannot avoid a surgery, then a focus examination can be performed by a trained anesthesiologist. In that, you assess for 5 Fs. Those are fluid, that is pericardial or pleural effusion, form, that is how is the heart size, how are the walls, how is the size of left side of heart and right side of heart, flow, is there any valve failure, or how is the cardiac output, filling pressures, IVC, function, that is contraction, valves opening or not, valves thickening. So these can be done by a trained anesthesiologist only. So there are some recommendations about stress imaging. Stress imaging should be considered before high risk NCS in asymptomatic patients with poor functional capacity and prior to PCI or CABG. And about coronary angiography, CCTA, that is CT coronary angiography, should be considered to rule out CAD in patient with suspected CCS or biomarker negative NST ACS in case of low to intermediate clinical likelihood of CAD, or in patients with not suitable for non-invasive functional testing undergoing non-urgent, intermediate and high-risk non-cardiac surgeries. So ESC guidelines are given classified surgeries into low, intermediate and high-risk surgeries. You can go into it later. So it is an excellent flow chart given about the evaluation of preoperative assessment before non-cardiac surgery. If a non-cardiac surgery is emergent or urgent, then there is no time to wait for all this evaluation to be done. If it is a time-sensitive non-cardiac surgery, then multidisciplinary decision should be taken. If it is an elective non-cardiac surgery, then accurate history taking should be done. Advise stopping smoking or optimize guideline recommended medical therapy. If patient is less than 65 years without any risk factor for CVD and low risk for low risk surgeries, nothing has to be done. For intermediate risk NCS, nothing has to be done. For high risk non-cardiac surgeries, ECG and biomarkers are indicated. That is a class 2A recommendation. If patient is more than 65 years or with severe risk factors, then low risk cardiac for low risk surgeries, nothing has to be done. For intermediate risk surgeries, ECG and biomarkers has to be seen. And for high risk NCS, again ECG and biomarkers and functional capacity has to be assessed. For patients with established cardiovascular diseases, for low risk surgeries, again nothing has to be done. For intermediate NCS surgeries, ECG, biomarkers and functional capacity has to be seen. For high risk cardiac surgery, non-cardiac surgeries, ECG, biomarkers, functional capacity and cardiology consultation has to be done, and a multidisciplinary approach is recommended. And there is something, there are very interesting topic, that is of risk stratification, where you can predict chance and incidence of a patient developing major cardiovascular events post surgery. So there are 7 to 8 of these scores. Very common scores I am mentioning here. First is RCRI, Revised Cardiac Risk Index, given by Lee. So it takes into consideration history of ISD, high risk type of surgery, history of congestive heart failure, history of cerebrovascular disease, preoperative treatment with insulin and serum creatinine. So according to the scoring, they have given risk of major adverse coronary events. That is, it is highest in patient having 3 or more scoring, and that is 15% risk of MACE. Next is Goldman Index. It considers 9 parameters. Based on that, they have given 4 classes. In class 4, the risk of mortality is 56%. So these two, RCRI and Goldman Index, are most commonly used by cardiologists in their practice. Unfortunately, we are not doing this risk stratification. It all comes from cardiologists only. The third is NSQAP calculator. It is an online calculator which takes into consideration 21 parameters. It is better than RCRI, and it gives a graphical representation of all the complications that are possible in that surgery. And it also predicts the hospital length of stay. So these are all the scoring systems given. So, prevention is always better than cure. So there are some preventive strategies to optimize these patients. First is coronary revascularization. It should be considered in indicated patients before elective surgery. Coronary artery stenting may further add to complexity in perioperative hemostatic management. The surgical stress induced sympathetic stimulation and hypercoagulable state may add to the risk of perioperative stent thrombosis. Therefore, a risk-benefit ratio needs to be meticulously assessed preoperatively. As of now, it is recommended to delay elective NCS until 6 months after elective PCI and 12 months after an ACS. After an elective PCI, it is recommended to delay time-sensitive NCS until a minimum of 1 month of DAPT treatment has been given. In patient with recent PCI scheduled for NCS, it is recommended that management of antiplatelet therapy is discussed between the surgeon, anesthesiologist and the cardiologist. And in high-risk patients with a recent PCI, a DAPT duration of at least 3 months should be considered before time-sensitive non-cardiac surgery. About recommendations about pharmacological treatment are: perioperative continuation of beta blockers is recommended as a class 1 level of evidence. In patients who are already taking statins, it is recommended to continue them. In patients with stable heart failure, perioperative continuation of RAS inhibitors may be considered. That is class 2B recommendation. Interruption of RAS inhibitors on the day of NCS should be considered to prevent perioperative hypotension. It is sometimes it is very confusing when patient is on RAS inhibitors whether to continue them or whether not to continue them. So it has to be, it depends on the condition of the heart. If the heart is failing and there is risk of hypertension, then you can withhold them. But if the patient is a hypertensive patient and LV function is normal, then you can continue them. For patients on diuretics to treat hypertension, transient discontinuation of diuretics on the day of NCS should be considered. It should be considered to interrupt SGLT2 inhibitors therapy for at least 3 days before intermediate and high risk non-cardiac surgery, as it leads to euglycemic diabetic ketoacidosis. Smoking cessation is a class 1 recommendation, should be stopped at least 4 weeks before NCS. And for any elective NCS, control of cardiovascular risk factors like BP, dyslipidemia, diabetes is recommended. So monitoring is of paramount importance while doing these cases. In addition to normal monitoring, 2-lead ECG with ST segment analysis, invasive BP monitoring and CVP monitoring may be considered. Transesophageal echography is very important. Pulmonary artery catheter will give you valuable data. Cardiac output monitoring with invasive, minimally invasive or non-invasive techniques can be employed in very sick cases. And temperature monitoring is also important. Non-invasive cardiac monitoring, Edwards has provided very good sensors and techniques to monitor the cardiac output non-invasively. Acumen IQ cuff, it is a small cuff which can be used to monitor cardiac output index, cardiac index, stroke volume, SVI, SVV, PPV All these hemodynamic data we can get non-invasively. Minimally invasive sensors like Acumen IQ sensor or flow track sensor, these will also provide similar data. Edwards visually is very commonly used to get cardiac output, SVC, SV, stroke volume, SVR and SVRI. And advanced Swan-Ganz catheters can be used in transplant surgeries to get accurate data. It also provides SVO2. Transesophageal echo is of paramount importance as it is very sensitive for detecting acute segmental wall motion abnormalities, and it can be detected even before ECG changes are occurring. Now recently, left ventricular global longitudinal strain, it is an echocardiographic measurement of subclinical systolic dysfunction, and it is of prognostic utility among patients with hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, heart failure and valvular heart diseases. Diagnosing PMI is very difficult. Diagnosis of ACS in patient under GA is challenging. One has to recall the clinical history and take into consideration the relevant risk factors. Then patient symptoms, if patient is awake and under regional, that has to be taken into consideration, like chest pain, jaw pain, dyspnea, peripheral pulses, one has to check. One has to look for crackles, desaturation. Intraoperative ECG changes like ST elevation, depression, T-wave inversions and heart blocks are to be considered. Arrhythmias, tachycardia, bradycardia, hypertension is to be looked into. So I will quickly come to management of intraoperative ACS. Whenever there is intraoperative ACS, it could be a non-ST segment elevation MI or ST segment elevation MI. So anesthetic goals are maintaining myocardial oxygen delivery, that is with adequate oxygenation, maintaining mean arterial pressure, coronary perfusion pressure and avoiding anemia. Reducing myocardial oxygen demand, that is done by avoiding tachycardia, avoid LV distension, treating arrhythmias. One has to avoid additional myocardial stress factors, treating metabolic disturbances like acidosis, hypokalemia, hypocalcemia, optimize BSL, anticoagulation, and there is something called as goal-directed therapy for heart failure, that can be considered in patients with heart failure. That can be done with the Swan-Ganz catheter with all the hemosphere and all advanced cardiac output monitors. Coronary perfusion pressure is diastolic blood pressure minus left ventricular end diastolic pressure, and it has to be maintained. To increase the coronary perfusion pressure, one has to increase the diastolic blood pressure and reduce the LVEDP, that is left ventricular end diastolic pressure. One has to consider vasopressors, increasing hematocrit, diuretics, and avoid tachycardia. For hemodynamically unstable PMI, usually these patients are having LV dysfunction, there are decompensation of LV, there are arrhythmias, demand supply mismatch in critical LM or critical left main TVD or TVD stenosis is there. It requires aggressive approach. One has to abandon the procedure. One has to get troponins if high sensitivity troponin if it is available, and anti-pro-BNP. Then DAPT or heparin has to be considered. One has to shift the patient for emergency ICA and PCI. ICA is invasive coronary angiography. Thrombolysis is contraindicated in surgical patients. Inotropes may increase the infarct size. So vasopressors has to be increased to maintain the coronary perfusion pressure. These patients may require intra-aortic balloon pump. IBP reduces the cardiac work and improves the coronary perfusion. For hemodynamically stable patients of STEMI, nitrate infusion, DAPT loading, then invasive coronary angiography followed by PCI is the approach. For stable patients of non-ST segment elevation myocardial infarction, it is management is different from STEMI, as there is partial coronary occlusion, total coronary occlusion is not there. It is due to demand supply mismatch due to secondary stresses. So treating the cause may abolish the ECG changes. So anticoagulation with heparin and LMWH has to be initiated. Reducing the cardiac work and coronary perfusion pressure is to be maintained. Beta blockers has to be given for tachycardia, vasopressors to increase the CPP and MAP. ICA and is very less frequently required. Chalo, thank you all for patient listening, and I thank ISA Sangli Mirrors for the opportunity. Thank you.
Very nicely elaborated topic. Thank you, Dr. Ame, for very informative talk.
Dr. Amey, may I ask you, in your clinical practice, do you face any untoward event of this ACS?
Yeah, many times.
Any non-cardiac case?
Yes.
Yeah.
Once during a case of pheochromocytoma, I have faced this situation where due to excess catecholamine surge, there was tachycardia. And due to that, there was ST segment depression and T wave invasion continuously on the ECG. So we did T, we sent biomarkers, then we managed, we got the tumor out quickly so that noradrenaline surge was down. After that, the patient got automatically stabilized. So the crux is in NSTEMI, if you treat the cause, the ECG changes get abolished.
That's great. If any residents are here, I would like to say we were doing one phase, that is functional endoscopic sinus surgery, and the ENT surgeon, they infiltrate the adrenaline concentration. As usual, we give only one, that to a diluted concentration, but at the back of our this thing, they diluted more adrenaline and they infiltrate. That was a young female, and patient started throwing arrhythmias therein. So it was very difficult to manage. So very precaution. One should have a very precaution while infiltrating any local infiltration or vasoconstrictors like that. Thank you very much. It was a good presentation.
Thank you, everyone. I request all dignitaries to be proceed towards the felicitation bench.
Wait. We have a group photo. Yesterday we had a poster presentation session for our PG students, and we are going to declare results now. Dr. Pratibha Kane madam and Dr. Sharmila Borkar ma'am will felicitate the students at the felicitation point. And the winners are, 4th prize goes to Dr. Neha Shirur from GMC Mirrors. This is consolation prize. 3rd prize goes to Pranali Shah from Bharati Vidyapit Sangli. 2nd prize goes to Supriya Tike from Solapur. And first winner is Dr. Aniket Wankhede from Nanded.